Hello, welcome to Lily de Silva, Pali Primer, Lesson 17. This Lesson 17 deals with what is described in Lily de Silva as the past tense. There's one page of grammar. There is a little bit more to it than that. But what I would say is that page 66 of Lily de Silva is a very good start and will give you a good deal of what you need to know about the past tense. So what I will do is, first of all, I'll go through the lesson as it's laid out in Lily de Silva, and then I'll give you a bit of additional material on it. So let me call up my iPad for you. So please have page 66 open. So past tense. Okay, past tense. In Sanskrit, we have various past tenses. We have the imperfect, we have the reduplicated perfect, and we have the aorist, and we have, in addition, other ways of forming the past tense. For example, simply using a past active participle instead of a verb. That's a very common way of doing it, and it's done in Pali as well. The complications of the Sanskrit past tenses, that's the finite past tenses, that's that conjugate as verbs, is what we mean by a finite verb. With their verb endings indicating person, number, tense. The finite verbs, the imperfect, the aorist, the reduplicated perfect, as it's called. Reduplicated perfect, a few remnants left in Pali, but it's not that there isn't a full range of them. While we're on the subject, for example, from the root bhu, we have a babhuva, which is the same in Sanskrit and Pali as a reduplicated perfect. That's the most common reduplicated perfect that we see in Pali. I mean, he, she, or it was or became. But mostly Pali has the aorist, just the aorist, without a separate imperfect or perfect. The aorist, by the way, it comes from the Greek ahoristos. Horistos means limited. It's the same word as horizon, actually. The horizon, the horizon in Greek, is the limit of what you can see, your horizon. And if something is aorist, it means it's unlimited, but unlimited in the sense that it's just a general past. It doesn't limit or means undefined, unspecified. There's an unspecified past. It means it doesn't specify whether it was an imperfect, an ongoing action, a pluperfect, an action that had begun, that had terminated rather before another action, or whether it's a perfect or a past definite. So the aorist just means the, as it were, the indeterminate past. It's a general tense indicating happened in the past. That's all that aorist means. It was called aorist by the grammarians because of the formal similarities with the classical Greek aorist, and a lot of the early grammarians, particularly people like Monier Williams, Whitney, MacDonnell, they'd all started off on a basis of the classics, Latin and Greek, and so they tended to apply the Latin and Greek grammatical terminology to Sanskrit, and much of it has stuck. So it's because of the formal similarities between the Sanskrit aorist and the Greek aorist that was called the aorist. And you'll find in most grammars, Lily de Silva doesn't use the word, but in most grammars, the word aorist is used for this tense. So let's just see how it's formed. We have the root pach, and in the present tense, as we know, it goes pachami, pachasi, pachati, pachama, pachata, pachanti. Let's now put it into the past. And you'll see this series of endings. So he, she, it cooked. Instead of pachati, I'll write the present tense in the middle. And this is present and aorist. This column. It is pachi. Pachi. And it can also be apachi. In Sanskrit, the aorist always has this augment, this initial a. Nothing it looks like, but has nothing to do with the negating a, meaning not or It's an entirely separate thing. It's just coincidental similarity. In Pali, there are fairly complex rules, which varied over time, whether you add the augment or not. There's pachi or apachi. Very often it's optional. Some cases it's not optional. Sometimes you find that in the earlier scriptures, the Nikayas, which are closer to what the Buddha actually said, it tends more often to have the augment. In the later literature, the augment is very often dropped. It doesn't specially matter because for the purposes of reading Pali, because it's the ending of the verb that gives it away as an aorist. So pachi, and the second singular, thou cookest, you singular cook. It's also pachi or apachi, and I cook is pachami, and the aorist is either pachim or apachim. And in the plural, let me go to a new page for the plural. We cook, again, present and aorist. Pachama and pachimha, or apachimha, you can have either. You, plural, cook, present, pachata. You cooked, plural, is pachita. Or apachita. Right, they're equally correct, with or without the a. They cooked. They're present pachanti, they cook, and it's pachimsu. Pachimsu or apachimsu. Now what you'll notice here is that there's a characteristic vowel E in all of these endings. Pachi, pachi, pachim, pachimsu, pachita, pachimha. You will find almost the same in the endings of class 10. That's the verbs that end in ayati in Sanskrit, which then is usually lenited or softened to eti in Pali. So we get the root chur. Actually, strictly speaking, it's the root chur, but chur, and then a chora is a thief, and then that makes you can make a verb out of the noun chorayati. So he steals chorayati. he stole is choresi. Sorry, I've written chorayeti as if it was Sanskrit. Sometimes you see it written like that in Pali. Choreti is the more common one in Pali. Choreti. And in the past, there you insert an S. Choreti, choresi. Or chorayi. But again, you have this distinctive characteristic E at the end. You steal in the singular, choresi, and actually it so happens, slightly inconveniently, it's identical in form in the aorist, so choresi, you stole. I steal, choremi, and in Sanskrit and sometimes in Pali, it is actually chorayami. And the past definitely, well, sorry, the aorist is chorayim or choresim. Chorayim or choresim. Note here that we've got a similar phenomenon that we saw with Pachi. You've got the ending E and E for both the what we call the third and the second, and the first person, I. It's the same as the second and third, but with the addition of the M at the end. We see the same phenomenon occurring here. Choresi, chorayi, choresi, chorayim, or choresim. So it's the same forms, but you just add an M. And in the plural, just as we had pachimha, we cooked, we have chorayimha. Notice that where you have the E following the Y, it becomes not E, but ayi. It can the ayi restores itself. So it's closer to the Sanskrit form. So we stole, they stole, so you can either have choresum, or chorayimsu. They stole. That is chorenti or chorayanti. In the present, chorenti, chorayanti. Past, choresum, chorayimsu. You steal, present tense, second plural, choreta. And in the past, chorayita. Again, this characteristic E and the E before the second plural ending, chorayita. And we steal, chorema. We stole, chorayimha. So on this page, there's not too much to learn. Just look at the couple of variants. Particularly look at both the variants for the third person plural they, choresum or chorayimsu, and from pachati, pachimsu. Actually, there's only one form, the pachimsu, or with the augment, apachimsu. So there's imsu or sum, esum are these characteristic endings for the third plural. Where you have what in Sanskrit is a class 9 verb, that is in Sanskrit Kri. That's where you insert the na, which is distinctive of this conjugation. So he sells is Krinati, which in Pali is Kinati. This forms its aorist on the basis of the present stem. So he sold would be Akini. Not Kinati, Akini. And they sold Akinimsu. We sold Akinimha, and so on. That is not how it's done in Sanskrit, but it is how it's done in Pali. I'll go now through the illustrative sentences, looking at page 67. The king wandered in the island. So wander here, just charati, went around, now well-known root char. So bhupalo dipe chari, or achari. Bhupalo dipe achari. In the present tense, it would be bhupalo dipe charati, but chari or achari. The monk preached the Dhamma. Samano Dhammam te sesi. There is the phrase, he taught the 7 bojjhangas, which was bojjhange satta desayi. So the bojjhange, accusative plural, satta 7, desayi. It could equally have been, this is from the Bojjhanga Paritta. This could equally have been desesi, but these both alternative forms are equally valid, and we had it here. So chorayi, choresi, desayi, desesi. From deseti, he points out, or he teaches. So sentence number 2, a little bit down, page 67. You sold goods. So just say kinati means to sell, because kinati buy, vikinati is to sell. So you sold goods. Tuam bandani vikini. Let's just look at this. You had the kri, meaning to buy. Vikri in Sanskrit. Vi plus root kri is to sell. Vikrinati, he sells. Vikini, vikini, he sold, also you sold is I ending on its own, means I or he or you singular. Vikini. There's that dot under, which, as it were, subconsciously remembers that in Sanskrit it was a krin, so a subdotted n after the r. So, tuam bandani vikini, you sell goods. Tuam bandani vikinasi, you sold goods. Tuam bandani vikini. You offered the flowers. Tuam pupani pujesi. This is from the noun puja, generally meaning a religious ceremony. Offering is often sometimes translated as worship. So in Sanskrit, pujayati. In Pali, pujayati. And we know buddham pujami. In Sanskrit, we buddham pujayami. Pali, buddham pujami. Pujesi, because of the form of it, that's ambiguous there between present and past. So in Pali, pujesi can be either from the Sanskrit pujayasi, you worship or you make an offering, or pujesi, it can be the aorist form. Sentence number 3, I climbed the mountain. So aham pabbatam aruhim, aruhati, he climbed, aruhim, I climbed, aham pabbatam aruhim. I lit the lamp, aham deepam jalesim or jalayim. No distinction of meaning, both forms are equally valid. Jalesim is called a sigmatic or an S aorist, where an S comes in before the ending. We'll do a little bit more about that in a few minutes after we finish the Lily de Silva grammar section. Now, moving to the plural, it's halfway down page 67. Kings wandered in the islands. Bhupala, Dipesu, Charimsu, this characteristic imsu ending for the third plural. And this is one of those verbs where you can either have or not have the augment in the aorist. So Bhupala, Dipesu, Charimsu, or Acharimsu, both equally correct. No distinction at all in the meaning. You, plural, you sold goods. Tumhe bhandani vikinitta. Tumhe bhandani vikinitta. You, plural, offered flowers. Tumhe pupani pujayitta. So we see this character and characteristic itta ending, second plural aorist. And finally, we climbed mountains. Mayam pabbate aruhimha. Imha. Mayam pabbate aruhimha. And we lit lamps. Mayam dipe jalayimha. And of course, in all of these sentences, the pronoun tumhe, mayam, aham, tuam can be left out because, of course, it's understood from the ending of the verb what the pronoun is. Same as in Latin and Italian and Spanish, where you can leave out the pronoun because the verb itself will indicate whether you're talking about he, she, it, you, singular, I, we, and so on. So that is a very simple overview of the aorist in Pali. What I'm going to show you now is a block of text. It's from one of the Jataka stories. It's okay, I'm not asking you to understand the entire thing. What I am inviting you to do here, got this right, is to look at these, just recognize the aorists. I've given it away by highlighting them. But if you look at it, you've got this characteristic ending, these esi, akamsu, the umsu ending. This, in fact, is from the root kri, to do, akamsu, they did. Tassa paloti namam akamsu, literally, they called him the pala, the protector. Literally, his protector, thus name they made. So namam akamsu, literally, they made a name, they named him. Our verb labhati, he gets, he obtained. Labhi, characteristic aorist ending, just with the e. It could equally have been alabhi, by the labhi. So anyam puttam labhi, he had another son. Anyam puttam labhi, obtained another son. Voharamsu, from voharati, to decide or nominate, something like that. Vohalimsu, just you can see by the ending, this imsu ending, there's only one thing it can be there, and that's a third person plural aorist. Similarly, Bandhimsu, they bound. So Ghara Bandhanena Bandhimsu, they bound him with a house binding, so he was bound to his house. Adasi, this is an S aorist where we have the S coming in, is from our root da, meaning to give. Adasi, he sure it gave. Patipadji, this kind of thing wouldn't be allowed in Sanskrit, but here we have an aorist formed off the present base, as we had with kinati, akini, vikinati, vikini. Patipad is to proceed, to go along. In Sanskrit, pratipadyate with a dya. In Pali, patipadjati. Now look here, instead of the ati, you have the e, the characteristics of patipadji. Look at that verb ending in an e, it has to be the aorist. Vardhi. In Sanskrit, vardhate, to grow. Pali, vardhati. Vardhati, present tense. Aorist, vardhi. Rogo, the illness. Rogo vardhi. The illness grew. In other words, he became more ill. Rogo vardhi. Ahusi, about the most frequent aorist that you are going to see in Pali. It's from the root bhu. And just as from the root bhu, we can have either bhavati or the softened, what we call the lenited form hoti. So, equally, for the aorist, we have ahosi. It was, or it became. A very frequent usage is that it occurred to him, he thought thus, and it's the dative or genitive / dative. To him it was thus, meaning it occurred to him, or this thought arose in him. So the Buddha thought thus, or it occurred to the Buddha thus. So you could say Buddhassa. Sorry, I'm writing. Let me get my iPad for you. Buddhassa, treats the dative here. Etad ahosi, to the Buddha this was. Etad ahosi, meaning the Buddha thought thus, or the following thought occurred to the Buddha. Kilesa, there's the kleshas, the defilements. Highlight this. Oops, where's my cursor? Here we are. Kilesa cha bhijimsu, from the root bid, meaning to split. A bheda is a split. If something is split, passive bhijati in Pali, and in the past, in the aorist, third person plural, bhijimsu. Again, this unmistakable ending, imsu. Imsu. So they split. So kilesacha bhijimsu, literally, and the defilements split. In other words, he was cured of his defilements. And raha ahosi. Ahosi often means not just was, but became. So araha ahosi, he became an arahant. So if you look at this page, you will see, even though you don't actively learn all those endings by heart, you can very easily spot an aorist with this characteristic umsu, esi, imsu, labhi, bandhimsu, patipadji, vadhi. You see, they're very easy to spot. And another giveaway is that where in prose. In poetry, the rules are a bit more fluid with word order. But you will very, very frequently, more often than not, have an aorist at the end of a sentence. And look here, pujesi. So, using my cursor. Here we are. Pujesi, full stop. Akansu, full stop. Labhi, full stop. Vuharimsu, full stop. Bandimsu, full stop. You see? Adasi, full stop. Patipaji, full stop. Vadi, full stop. Ahosi, full stop. Binjimsu, full stop. Ahosi, again, full stop. So that's another way of a fairly sure guide of spotting these aorists, because it will very, very frequently be the last word in the sentence. Now, let us, where you have a series of verbs all in the past, you will very, very rarely see, if it's a sequence of events, you will very rarely see more than one aorist in the sentence. You will much more frequently see the absolutive for the previous verbs. So here, in this particular sentence, you'll see nibatitva, the absolutive, and gehetva, having taken, absolutive, three verbs, a twa absolutive, another twa absolutive, and then the pujesi aorist. And again, labhi, look at labhi. Mata, even without understanding the sentence, just look at the form of the words. Mata tasa adhavitva, paridhavitva, and so on. Again, the two previous verbs in the absolutive, and only the final verb in a finite form, that is by finite, not participial, but fully conjugated in person and tense and number, labhi. And again, tassa mata pitru chula paloti namam katva, again, having done, vuharimsu, having done, they decided, or made up their mind. Finally, I'm going to call something up which I don't want to frighten you with. It is an analysis that I've done, and it's still work in progress. It's on the on my Google Drive. Let me see if I can expand this for you. Come on, expand. Here we are. Here we are. I've put the link for it in the study resources sheet for lesson 17. So for additional material on the aorist tense, go to this page on the Google Drive, and I've given the Google Drive link. And that Google Drive link will call up. Let me do it for you right now. The Google Drive link call up this page, which is the Sanskrit and Pali grammar, and the 141A aorist Sanskrit with Pali comparison. And that is the sheet that I've just called up for you here. Where's it gone? Sorry, where's it gone? Let me call it up again. There we are. For those of you who haven't spotted, or a reminder, why is it called 141? It's simply because, for ease of reference, we've got all sorts of different grammars in Sanskrit and Pali, all with their different paragraph numbering, section numbering, and so on, just so that I can have one coherent system of numbering in which we can choose as a template for hopefully the whole of Sanskrit and Pali grammar. I'm simply following the paragraph numbering of MacDonnell's Sanskrit Grammar for Students. So in MacDonnell, he deals with the aorist in his section 141, and so it's become 141 is our number that attaches to the aorist. So some forms in Pali look pretty weird, and you might say, well, why does it do that? Why is from the root kri to do? Why does it become akasi and so on? As so often happens, forms that look irregular or incomprehensible in Pali will be fully understood if you know what they are in Sanskrit. For example, this is just, sorry, please don't be too put off by this. It's much more complex than you need at this stage. So treat this as a kind of reference thing. So if we look, for example, at so I'm going to have to pause so I can find it myself now. Yeah, in 14133, the s and the ish and the sish forms of the aorist. If you look at the root kri, it's actually a regular formation, a karshit in Sanskrit. It's the kri, the root kri. Let me just take you to my iPad. So you make the aorist this particular, of the 7 possibilities of how you can make the aorist in Sanskrit, this particular verb kri, to make, you do it by vriddhi of the r. You put the augment, the a, vriddhi of the r, so the krit becomes kar. You add the sh, and the, instead of the just an e ending in Pali, it's the eat, so a karshit, he, she, or it did or made. Okay, it looks a bit complex. You don't need to remember this by heart now, but a karshit is a regular formation of the aorist from kri in Sanskrit. Where you have then the Pali form, which is akasi, which we saw in this text I had up for you a moment ago. Oh, sorry, it's not akasi, it's the plural, akamsu, but the same principle applies, akamsu. If it was singular, it would be akasi. So it might look like a very puzzling form in Pali, but if you know what it came from in Sanskrit, end of puzzlement, it's a regular formation in Sanskrit. And I'll give you a couple more examples. So akarshit, all this deals with, here we are, look, the S-form paradigm. It takes the vriddhi, parasmaipada, kri, vriddhi, akarsham, akarshi, akarshit. In Pali, akasim, akasi, akasi. The long eat of the Sanskrit becomes a short e in Pali here. And for example, the root chid, you vriddhi the root, to chid, to chade, and add the sa, sam, si, sit. So a chaitsam, a chaitsi, a chaitsi, meaning to split or cut. And from that you get the Pali, for example, a chechi. Let me scroll down. I'll get to it for you. We'll be there in a moment. Let's see. Here we are. So from the chid, you might see in Pali, he split something, a chechi. Well, how would you get a chechi from the root chid? Well, there we have it. In Sanskrit, it is a regular formation. chid becomes a chetsit in the aorist, and that by regular phonetic mutation gives us the achechi in Pali. So this is just a brief glance to show you yet again how a knowledge of the Sanskrit, you don't need necessarily to learn all the forms of the Sanskrit by heart, but just by knowing where to find them, seeing what it is in Sanskrit, then it completely explains what otherwise might look like a wildly irregular form in Pali. So I hope this is not too off-putting. I would venture to say that the aorist is probably, both in Sanskrit and in Pali, is probably the most complex singular block of grammar. So if you've got the aorist, as it were, that's the worst of it. Everything else, to my mind anyway, is somewhat simpler than the aorist. If you have this overview, get the overview into your mind, remember how to spot, even before you start learning them by heart, learning how to spot an aorist, the way that I've shown you here. So hopefully this will have been some use to you, and will set you on the right track to a mastery of the aorist. Thank you.